Okay, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are. Welcome to our September SAI monthly meeting. So during these meetings, we catch up with members, see what they're doing, get updates, new members that are joining us as well, present their work. So it's a really great opportunity to get together and engage with each other. And really the focus again at SAI is this connection between science and society, and kind of our vision is making STEM broadly accessible and universal to all. And the way we do that is by promoting science, promoting STEM broadly, developing programs, and also advising other organizations that are in this space. And so I'm very excited today to welcome actually Aravind, who we've been talking for the last couple of months, and I've been very impressed with his organization, what they're doing, and doing all of this as a rising senior, I believe, right, Aravind, at Hillsborough High School in New Jersey. So I certainly was not doing half of what, even the third or fraction of what he's doing now. So we're all excited to hear more about what you're doing. So he's the president and the board chair at Simply Neuroscience. And I won't spill the beans too much. I'll let him tell you more about Simply Neuroscience and some of the things that he's doing. He has quite a lot of data. I'm sure that he'll be presenting as well. So this will work. He'll present, and then right afterwards, we will engage in conversation. Now, if someone has an urgent question, you can ask him directly, but we'll of course have time afterwards as well. So Aravind, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to join SAI and excited to present my work. So my presentation is Pursuing the Brain, Unlocking the Future, 1 neuron at a time. And as I go through the presentation, you will see what that means and how I've tried to pursue this path. So who am I? Why am I here? To take this line from the 1992 vice presidential debate, Admiral Stockdale, just like Admiral Stockdale, I find myself slightly outclassed in SAI, a high school student amongst PhDs, graduate students. So I'm honored to be here. But I just wanted to introduce myself before I move forward with the presentation. So this explains my background in science and why I became interested in science. So as a proud New Jerseyan, I enjoyed going to the Liberty Science Center near New York City as an elementary school student, as a young student. The Liberty Science Center has numerous exhibits, experiments, other interactive activities for young kids to explore science, and I credit it for much of my interest in science. So this is me when I was about 6 or 7 years old, so about 10 or so years ago. And you can see how excited this young boy is to learn science. The Liberty Science Center, as I said before, is a very enjoyable place for children to learn science. And as you can see, I'm enjoying myself learning science there. So it so happens that at one of the visits that I had to the Liberty Science Center, there was this exhibit where you could have a mock surgery on a banana. So along with this mock surgery, they introduced kids to surgical techniques, the field of medicine, and how medicine can be used to improve everyday lives. So this was one of my main inspirations actually for going into science. Operating on a banana simulated the excitement of surgery. Obviously, it was just a kid's activity, but at that time, it was extremely exciting to me, extremely interesting and fascinating to see the prospects of what I could do if I entered into medicine. Around the same time, in about first grade, I got glasses. I was first afraid that I would be ostracized by my classmates. Maybe they would make fun of me for having glasses, the common jokes of having glasses. Luckily, that didn't happen. And in fact, one of my doctors, my ophthalmologist, Dr. Barry Wasserman, is one of my other inspirations for going into medicine and pursuing science. So Dr. Wasserman has this extremely desirable combination of patient care skills, knowledge about ophthalmology, and this extremely funny demeanor overall that makes patients feel comfortable no matter what procedure they're going through, as you can see in these two images. I was also very fascinated by this phoropter machine and all the other ophthalmological tools and techniques that he was using. So it was also fascinating to me how this doctor can combine humanities and STEM to make a difference in people's lives. So Dr. Wasserman was also one of my biggest inspirations to pursue medicine and science. As I grew older into middle school and high school, I became interested in how the brain works. At this time, I wanted to be an ophthalmologist and pursue this field to become just like Dr. Wasserman. As I began to learn more about ophthalmology and how vision works, I became fascinated and became introduced to how vision works actually in the brain. So you can see this basic diagram of the eyes, retina, optic chiasm, occipital lobe, and how vision works in the brain. So this was in fact even more fascinating to me. If vision itself was this complicated, what else could the brain do? It was a new frontier that I was extremely excited to explore. And then as I moved forward to high school, I continued exploring neuroscience through research experiences, through simply neuroscience, and that brings me to where I am today. So been quite a journey, and I'm excited to see where I'll go next. So that brings me to simply neuroscience, which has been one of my biggest pursuits for the last few years. In fact, we only started in May 2019, so quite young, but I'm proud of all that we've accomplished so far. So first, I'll take you through the logic model of simply neuroscience, which the main sections are the inputs, outputs, and outcomes or impact. And then I'll go in detail of what our outputs are and some details of the initiatives that we currently are doing. So this is the logic model of simply neuroscience. You can see our inputs, outputs, and the outcomes of these outputs. So these are some of the investments that we have. So we have 301 staff members, most of whom are active on a weekly basis. And since most staff members are expected to contribute only 1 to 2 hours a week, but with our leadership members contributing significantly more than that, I estimated that our total average time commitment per week is around 650 hours. In terms of money, we don't go that large in terms of other relative to other nonprofit organizations. We have about $250 in our bank account. Luckily, that hasn't been too much of a significant barrier. And luckily, Dr. Malindi has committed to supporting us with some future monetary needs as well. We have about 50 nonprofit partners, including examples such as the Coronavirus Visualization Team, a nonprofit started at Harvard, Decipher, which is a nonprofit which is building software to simplify automatically scientific text such as research papers, and Beyond the Five, who we're partnering with to release neuroscience courses online. And we have 47 more of these partners that we partner with in order to expand our mission further. We also
Aravind, quick question. So could you take us just one step back, explain the problem statement and sort of what you're actually trying to do as well? I think you haven't told us that yet. Like, what is simply neuroscience?
Yeah, I'll be covering that in the next few slides.
Okay.
So another investment we have or input we have is our advisory board. So it's comprised of 8 members who are either PhDs or professionals in neuroscience. One notable example is Dr. Uma Naidu, who is a professor at Harvard Medical School. So these professionals assist us in terms of our organization's initiatives and projects. And since we are all high school students or young college students, it's important to have these advisors to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. So next we move into outputs, what we convert these inputs into. We have events, so 4 major events per year. These are the International Youth Brainstem Summit, Simply Neurocon, the Intercollegiate Research Symposium, and Battle of the Brains. So in order respectively, the IYBS is a ideathon competition in which participants submit projects based on different tracks such as research, neuroethics, neuroeconomics, things like that. Simply Neurocon is an international neuroscience conference in which this year we had over 90 world-class neuroscience and psychology speakers come in and teach students about their field and inspire them. Then we have the Intercollegiate Research Symposium, which is for college students to submit research projects in which they get graded, compete against each other. And then Battle of the Brains, which is intended for high school students and middle school students to test their knowledge of neuroscience and psychology. We also have collaborations, as I mentioned before, with organizations such as Coronavirus Visualization Team and Beyond the Five. And then these cover some of our initiatives. So we have brain resource creation and writing, both of which create our main neuroscience content. We have legislation, which is responsible for mental health advocacy and working with politicians to expand access to mental health therapy. PSP, or the Presynaptic Project, which creates neuroscience content and workshops intended for elementary school students. TVC, or the Visual Cortex, which is science communication So essentially simplifying complex topics and raising awareness about topics. So recent examples of content include simplifying CRISPR-Cas9 and things like that. We have a podcast, The Synapse, which I highly encourage you to check out on Anchor or Spotify. Really interesting to see what they cover. And another example of our initiative is Humans of Neuroscience. So they interview and write about different prominent individuals in the field of neuroscience. So in terms of who we reach, so our main reach areas are high school students, undergraduates, but we also have graduate and doctoral students participating in our events and initiatives, as well as a good number of adult seniors, and specifically underrepresented minorities is a field that a demographic group that we try to reach and make sure that they are getting involved as well. So short, medium, and long-term impacts. So in the short term, the main impacts are learning, awareness, outreach, skills, exploration, and inspiration. We aim for our events, content, and initiatives to engage these different attributes and make sure that students are learning about neuroscience, that we're raising awareness about different issues such as mental health and things like that. In the medium term, we have seen that people are seeking out more neuroscience opportunities, so engaging in neuroscience research, interning in labs, things like that. They're getting involved in social activism to raise awareness about different mental health issues and to take action on these issues. Entrepreneurship, so starting their own movements and organizations around these issues. Research, so participating in neuroscience research, and even going back to their schools and implementing these and encouraging teachers to implement our content into the educational curriculum. And then in the long term, we only have been around for about a year, so the long-term impacts have not been seen as much, but we hope that legislative reform is in the works, so expanding access to mental health therapy, educational reform, so a nationwide or statewide implementation of our neuroscience curriculum, overall improved public mental health. So a key motivating factor behind this is actually many gun violence incidents are because of lack of mental health resources. So we hope that in the very long term, by using our mission, we can improve the public mental health and overall improve the productivity and peace of society. So the problems that we're solving are future slides, but the main mission statement of Simply Neuroscience is interdisciplinary neuroscience and psychology, education, outreach, and awareness. So these three pillars underlie all of our initiatives and projects. So the first problem we see are the lack of neuroscience courses. You may be aware of other content online. There are opportunities offered by universities like Johns Hopkins Medical School. And then there's courses on edX, Coursera, Beyond the Five, which is one of our partners. And even the Johns Hopkins Center for Talented Youth and Duke Talent Identification Program. But all of these sources pose some problems due to lack of accessibility. For example, if you click on edX, for example, and takes you to a Fundamentals of Neuroscience course, many of the courses are available to be audited for free. But as you can see here, if you would want the full experience, it takes about $270. So clearly cost prohibitive for a lot of people, even if they may be very interested in exploring the content. And then Coursera, again, same problem. In order to have the full experience, you need to pay a lot of money. Johns Hopkins Medicine, again, that's only available for the Baltimore area in this case. And many universities tend to be in areas where there are already a lot of access to neuroscience or science education. So in more rural areas of the United States, there may not be these opportunities. And then we move on to Johns Hopkins CTY and Duke TIP. So these are both programs for very high achieving high school, middle school, and elementary school students if they take the tests like the ACT and SAT at a young age and score highly. So I'm actually in the Johns Hopkins CTY program. But many students, if they cannot take these tests or don't score highly, they cannot participate in these programs. So for these students also, there's a severe lack of neuroscience and mental health education. So this is one problem that we face, and that is one problem that we're trying to address. So this is data from surveys that we conducted about neuroscience education. The sample size is low, 9 responses, but we only recently released it, and we expect the data to be roughly the same based on the opinions that we've heard. So do you feel that neuroscience is sufficiently taught in school? Most of the people say that it's not, about 8 to 9 people. Obviously, again, low sample size, but we feel that this is the overarching opinion. All of the schools that we've looked into don't have any explicit neuroscience content. It's only taught, even at the high school level, only in courses like AP Biology, which even most students don't take. And then another initiative that we're trying to implement in the area of neuroscience education is a national or statewide neuroscience day. So this neuroscience day is a day in which teachers and the entire school focuses on neuroscience through workshops, presentations on mental health and biomedical knowledge, and things like brain games and career fairs. So all of the participants in the survey so far have stated that either yes, it should be implemented, or maybe after some changes it should be implemented. So clearly students feel that there is a lack of neuroscience resources in schools, and there must be more implementation of these content. So another main problem that we're trying to address is the inadequacy of mental health services. So this is a problem that has been widely talked about, and that we're trying to address as well. So this is data from our own surveys as well. This survey was also recently released, so not too high of a sample size, but again, the majority of people say that there's not enough access to mental health resources at school. At the same time, people agree very strongly that mental health resources should be available at their school, and that it would be beneficial for them to have. So again, 100% of people say that mental health resources should be available to employees and employers, that mental health counseling should be covered by insurance, that mental health training should be provided to especially high stress jobs such as first responders and doctors, and that insurance should be more covering of mental health resources. So amongst the people we surveyed so far, and sample size will increase, but they clearly feel that mental health resources are lacking and that we should work to improve and implement these resources. So these are some opinions actually from the surveys. So if you don't believe the numbers, you can also look at these. There are quotes from students. So some examples say that they feel that a counseling department would be necessary for mental health. They think the helpline or anonymous advice channel would be beneficial, especially for students who have decreased motivation, mental health illnesses such as depression or dropping grades. This person's school has a psychologist, but they're only available for part of the week, and their resources are also lacking. So clearly all of these students strongly believe that mental health resources are lacking, and that there needs to be a greater implementation of better quality and more content of these mental health resources in schools, other than just the obligatory video that teachers play every year at the beginning of the year. So clearly there needs to be work in this area. And then if you don't believe our findings, also take a look at experts. So this is from collegestats.org, and they found that 40% of college students fail to seek help if they have mental health issues, 80% feel overwhelmed, 50% have anxiety, 30% mental health problems, 50% below average mental health, and 7% have a mental health issues in college. So even the experts corroborate our findings and show that students have significant mental health issues that oftentimes go unsolved. And even to add on to this, 75% of students who have depression don't seek help for their problems. 44% of college students have symptoms of depression and contemplate suicide. And in fact, suicide is the third leading cause of death among college students. So this is an extremely severe problem that we must take action to resolve in order to improve the well-being of our society, and especially our young people. Again, this is from the same website. So they also report that 80% of students feel stress daily. 13% have depression at some point in their lives. Also, same percent have a mental health condition. And 9%, a significant amount of people have contemplated suicide in the past year. This number should be 0%. So even 9% is extremely high for this metric. So how have we taken action to accomplish some of our goals that we set out in the beginning and address some of these very large-scale societal problems? So this takes you through a content of some of the initiatives of Simply Neuroscience. So as I explained before, our 4-event series per year includes the International Brainstem Summit, Simply Neurocon, the Intercollegiate Research Symposium, fondly named IRS, and Battle of the Brains. So these are our main event series every year. And then we have smaller monthly workshops interspersed between them by our event planning team. We also have awareness campaigns. So one of the recent initiatives was Wellness Week, in which we had a campaign in which we raised awareness about how to maintain mental health and well-being through content released on our social media accounts, different strategies of how to maintain mental well-being, and things like that. Another example of our initiatives is legislation. So as I briefly explained before, they're working to work with politicians to expand access to mental health therapy and advocate for these important causes, as well as implement a nationwide or at least statewide neuroscience day in which schools have an explicit focus on neuroscience and immerse students in these fields. PSP, BRC, TVC, also I know a lot of abbreviations, but PSP is the Presynaptic Project. As I said before, they create content for elementary and early neuroscience education. BRC, or Brain Resource Creation, which creates content for the high school level and middle school level and that range. And TVC, the Visual Cortex, which is science communication and simplifying complex topics, such as CRISPR-Cas9, as I mentioned before. And we also have a very successful podcast, The Synopsis, which again, check out on Anchor or Spotify. And I'll explain about that. I'll explain about all of these more in future slides as well. So this was the International Brainstem Summit. This was a very large-scale event conducted July 31st, August 1st, and August 2nd. And you can see some of the statistics we collected from this event. We had over 600 participants submitting 120 projects on 5 interdisciplinary neuroscience tracks. And we had about 40 judges judging these projects. And these participants hailed from 42 countries, so quite a large reach. So as you can see in all these surveys, about 99.6% say that they have learned something new. About 98.5% have stated that IYBS helped to spark their further interest in neuroscience. And 99.3% said that they would participate in future Simply Neuroscience events in the future. So clearly a fairly successful event in terms of the impact on participants. And we're glad that we were able to inspire and foster the interest in neuroscience and psychology for so many people from, in many cases, underserved and underrepresented backgrounds. So our most recent event and our most large-scale event to date was Simply Neurocon, which was August 22nd, 23rd, and 29th and 30th. So who did we reach by Simply Neurocon? We had about 69 countries of participants and 1,243 registered participants. So quite a large audience that we were able to reach with this virtual conference. And we're also fairly glad of what we've been able to accomplish with this conference. So in fact, we started planning Simply Neurocon about 8 months back in December 2019. We initially were planning to host this conference in New York City. And at that time, we were barely expecting 50 attendees. But then the COVID-19 pandemic arose and we didn't know how our plans would fare out. Luckily, we made the best of the situation and organized a virtual conference instead. That ended up being a substantial boost or advantage because we wouldn't have had these over 1,200 participants in a physical conference. So we're glad that we've been able to take advantage of and make the best out of the situation we're in and be able to reach so many more people than we would have before. So you can see that in this map of the regions that we've been able to reach. The areas that have low representation, as somewhat expected before, are Saharan and Sub-Saharan Africa in this range, as well as the eastern portion of the Middle East, and then Southern Europe, which was somewhat surprising. We would expect that Southern Europe, more developed countries would have greater representation, but overall quite diverse regions that we've been able to reach. And then also to go through the age distribution of participants. So we had about 40% were undergraduate students, so quite substantial portion, as well as the high school students are in the red, yellow, green, and purple regions of the pie chart, so also a substantial number. And then even some middle school students, as well as graduate and postgrad students. And then this white is working professionals. So quite a diverse audience in terms of demographics of age as well. So we conducted a survey to assess participant learning throughout the Simply Neurocon event. So this goes through some of the methods that I used to design the survey. So we had a pre-conference survey, mid-conference, and post-conference survey. The pre-survey was done from August 20th to August 22nd prior to the event starting, or for people who registered late, they would take the survey before attending their first session. The mid-survey was conducted between the 2 weekends of the conference, so August 24th to 28th, or at the halfway point of sessions for late registrants, and the post-survey. So It's still ongoing. People can still fill it out, but it's conducted after the conference ended, all the way up to September 4th so far. So these are the sample sizes of these of people who submitted this form. So we had 487 for the pre-conference survey, which is about 40% of the total. Less number for the mid-conference survey, about 20%, and post-conference we had about 165 people, so about 13%. So somewhat of a decline because people have started school and have gotten more busy, not able to fill out a survey, but you can see the results as they move on. And in order to incentivize people to fill out the survey, because otherwise why else would they be wanting to fill out this Google form that not too interesting. So we created this giveaway system in which if they did actions such as filling out all 3 surveys, subscribing to our YouTube channel, LinkedIn, Instagram, follows, things like that, they would be entered into a raffle. And then after the conference, we would have a raffle drawing in which they receive prizes. So this was the incentive that we used in the survey design. So the assumption is that obviously this is a self-reporting survey. So participants rate themselves from 1 to 10 on their knowledge level in different neuroscience areas, such as general neuroscience research, neuroethics, neuroart, things like that. So despite the expected self-reporting bias, this degree of bias, how much bias people have, should stay about constant over the 2 weeks in which the surveys were conducted. So the population level results should still be significant because we're looking at the relative amount of learning, not just the rating that individuals give themselves. So we had 12 different categories of sessions during the Neurocon event. And I'll take you through the amount of learning that they had for each of these types of sessions. So the first area of sessions were just general neuroscience knowledge. So you can see from the pre, mid, and post surveys, there's a substantial progression. In all of these, I didn't calculate the standard error, but that would probably give more data. But you can see just based on the averages, there is a clear progression of learning from the pre-conference, middle conference, and post-conference. So, and you can see the same pattern with the other categories as well. And then the sample sizes are obviously different between the pre, mid, and post surveys because the amount of people that are registered or filled out the survey, but you can still see that progression. So next we move to the AI computer science category integrated with neuroscience. So again, same pattern here, clear progression between pre, mid, and post surveys. So clearly throughout the conference, they learned from the speakers that had topics of these categories as well. Behavioral economics, same pattern, pre, mid, post, same substantial increase in the self-ratings of knowledge on these topics. Again, this also was successful in terms of teaching people behavioral economics and neuroeconomics. Neuroart, same pattern, significant progression throughout the conference. Same thing with neurolaw, significant progression. Neuroethics also, pre, mid, post, there is a substantial progression in terms of knowledge ratings. Neuroscience research, so this was knowledge of neuroscience lab techniques, how researchers design research methods for neuroscience experiments and investigations. So also in this, they had an increase in self-reported ratings. Neural development, so this is how the brain develops as humans progress through age. So again, similar level of knowledge increase. Clinical or medical neurology.
Aravind, so just to understand the scale, 1 is low, 10 is high, right?
Yeah, 1 is low, 10 is high.
Okay.
Yeah. So 1 is they know nothing, and 10 is that they were an expert on this category. So then we had clinical and medical neurology, which is actual neurology techniques such as neurosurgery and how the medical field uses neuroscience. So also in this, you can see this increasing, this change in distribution, so increasing in knowledge. Mental health and disorders, so this was interesting. So even in the pre-conference, there was already a pretty high knowledge level, which is somewhat surprising because people also reported that they have low mental health resources in schools. I think that this is because mental health is not as quantitative of a topic as the other categories. So maybe they, like the Dunning-Kruger effect, as it states, maybe they rated themselves more highly than they actually know about this topic. But again, there was still a progression of knowledge in this category as well. And then neurodesign, penultimate category, still a substantial progression. And in this one pre-conference, you can see that almost everyone knew almost nothing about this topic. And then by the end, they knew a good amount about this topic of how to use neuroscience to have good interior design and architectural design practices. And then lastly, careers and future paths in neuroscience. This was an important category because we are assessing if they actually knew how to translate what they learned in this conference to actual future paths and careers in neuroscience. And you can see that, in fact, they did. They learned more about this throughout the conference as well. So that brings me to the end of Simply Neurocon and our event series. IRS, or the Intercollegiate Research Symposium, and Battle of the Brains didn't happen yet, but they are in the works and will be happening in future months. So this brings me to another initiative of Simply Neuroscience, which is the Synopsis Podcast. You can find these on Anchor and Spotify if you want to listen to these episodes. And we have 6 main series of this podcast series. So we have Wits in the Walks of Life, the College Neuro Network, Mindfulness Series, 20 Years in Psychiatry, and the Mental Lobe Teenage Edition, and T-Talks. So you can see some of the podcast covers from our episodes. So College Neuro Network interviews professors and students at universities that have a high performance in neuroscience. So we have had episodes from UPenn, Brown, Yale, Princeton, other universities like that. The Mindfulness Series, which teaches listeners about strategies to maintain mental health and well-being. And then we have Wits in the Walks of Life, which is, again, more interdisciplinary neuroscience topics such as food for the mind, so the impact of diet on mental health, and another interior design integration, so the integration between design and neuroscience. And then we've had interviews with prominent individuals in neuroscience as well as a T-Talk series, which is a more informal exploration of different neuroscience topics. And we have about 21 episodes released so far since March 2020. And I am extremely proud of what this team has accomplished so far in just a few months. Another one of our departments or initiatives is awareness. So some of the projects that they've conducted are Wellness Week, which I explained before, mental health awareness, mindfulness content, and even content related to current events. So recently, because of the increased social awareness about racism and the importance of making sure minorities are integrated into society and especially STEM, awareness has created content on the psychological impacts of racism, implicit bias, and how that influences policing techniques and exploring racism in STEM. So we also aim to use the lens of neuroscience to raise social awareness about different important issues. And specifically implicit bias is important because currently politicians often don't take into account science when designing policies. And we hope that by raising awareness about topics such as implicit bias, policymakers can make more sensible public policies and using knowledge of implicit bias, make reforms in areas such as policing techniques and public policies on that area as well. And then you can check out our Instagram account to scroll through these content as well. And then I'll show you our Instagram account at the end. So these are our main content creation initiatives or departments. So we have the visual cortex, which is science communication, as I said before, presynaptic project, which is earlier elementary neuroscience education, brain resource creation, which is more high school directed content, and humans of neuroscience, which interviews and writes about prominent individuals in the fields of neuroscience and psychology. And these are the logos of each of these departments. So TVC, PSP, DRC, and HON, or Humans of Neuroscience. So yeah, most of these have their own individual Instagram accounts, so you can check those out after as well. So we strongly believe in the philosophy of unite and build. Divide and conquer is no way to make positive reforms in society as we aim to make. So in line with this philosophy of unite and build, we launched the Simply Neural Network. So the Simply Neural Network was started in August 2020 and still in development, but this is a global coalition of neuroscience and psychology related and mental health related nonprofits. And this is led by Simply Neuroscience. So I started this initiative just last month. So the goals of Simply Neural Network are to have this network between these related nonprofit organizations so we can have some resource sharing, initiative collaboration, and mutual guidance. So amongst student-run nonprofits, Simply Neuroscience is actually fairly large, and we hope that through the Simply Neural Network, we can mentor smaller and younger organizations and make sure that we collaborate on initiatives. And rather than competing, since we're nonprofits, the goal is collaboration to actually make the impact on society most effectively and most quickly by uniting together and working together. So we obviously have some remaining challenges. We have done substantial work, and I'm extremely proud of our 300-member team, but we have some challenges that we still have to face. As I explained before, we have to reach more underserved regions and demographics. We've had diverse audiences and reach so far, but it's important to make sure that we reach all the underserved regions and demographics. And in addition to that, we should make sure to implement our curriculum into schools. We've created substantial content on multiple levels in neuroscience and psychology and mental health, but we need to make sure that we work with school boards, educators to implement these curriculums into school systems to make sure that they're routinely taught and they have a broader reach among students. And lastly, we need to transform activism into policy change. So it's not enough to just raise awareness about these issues. We need to work with politicians to work with issues such as good public policy. So making reforms on areas such as policing techniques, using our knowledge of implicit bias. So using our expertise of neuroscience and using their expertise of policymaking to make public policies that actually work for society, that yield a beneficial impact on society. And then another policy change that we hope to make are expansion of access to mental health therapy covered by insurance, which is another substantial failure of the current healthcare system to not provide substantial mental health care for our patients. So ultimately, I believe that no hurdle is too high to overcome. It is the passion and drive that counts. So we've had substantial obstacles over our a little over a year of growth of Simply Neuroscience. And ultimately, our passion and drive have allowed us to power through these obstacles. We are committed to improving society through neuroscience education, awareness about mental health issues, and awareness about psychology. And we hope that through our passion and drive, we can continue to progress towards these very large-scale goals. So I'll be happy to take any questions as well. And then this is my personal contact info. You can feel free to reach out to me as well. I'd love to be connected with all of you. And then this is Simply Neuroscience's info. So you can check out our social media accounts on Instagram, LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, our website, and definitely listen to our podcast on Anchor or Spotify. Anchor is free, so you can probably use that if you don't have Spotify. And then this is our link tree. So if you know anyone that wants to apply to be a staff member of Simply Neuroscience, refer to them to this link. And then you can find their staff application and social media accounts and other important content linked to this link tree. So thank you so much, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Fantastic. Aravind, thank you so much for that detailed overview of your many initiatives, okay? So I think there's enough for questions. Please, if anybody has a question, raise your hand. Chris is clapping. I don't know if you can see that. So if you got a question, please just jump in and ask. I have lots, but I will refrain from asking. If no one has a question, I will just ask him anyway.
I have a quick question. Sorry I came in late. I was coming from a meeting, but I was just wondering if you touched on organizations that are doing this, I guess, already, because I know there's a lot of work that's going on in, like, you know, the sphere of like public policy, and there's a whole section of, like, you know, mental health for grad students. Like, how have you like assessed these other places?
Yeah, so Simply Neuroscience, as I said before, is relatively large actually amongst these student-run nonprofits and even normal nonprofits. But some of our other partner organizations include the International Youth Neuroscience Association, which is another neuroscience-related nonprofit working on similar issues. And then there's other partners that we've worked with public policy and even individual politicians themselves. So there are organizations working on these areas, but in the lens of neuroscience itself, I think we're fairly unique in that area. But definitely there are partners out there, and we will continue working with them as well.
Yeah, I was kind of along the same line. So given my experience with SFN, that might be worth checking out their outreach section. I can send it to you if that's helpful to connect with them maybe on some of this, because I could see that they could be a good partner and where they could promote your initiatives as well. That might be a good thing to do.
Yeah, definitely. We are actually thinking of presenting our research on neuroscience education at the SFN conference. This got canceled, so unfortunately we couldn't, but yeah, definitely we'll look into partnering with SFN.
Yeah, I think so. And the other thing, I actually was curious who you're looking at in terms of nonprofits around mental health. So I know two of them, but they're more focused on graduate and postdoc. So I don't know if you're sticking to kind of the high school demographic, it looks like, but if that's helpful to you, I can also share that because I know more about the grad student and postdoc mental health kind of data and what's happening in that space.
Yeah, definitely. I'd be interested. I think graduate and postdoc mental health is obviously as important as others' mental health, and I think reaching that demographic could also be really helpful for us.
So just to piggyback on that, so that you have the grad and postdoc sort of realm taken care of. I see the uniqueness here is that if you're targeting high school, college, that I think gives you that to Niba's question, like what is different about you that these other organizations are doing, right? You can think about articulating that in a sense like we are addressing this gap here, like high school to college transition point, which I think most of us are not thinking about too closely. We're so fixated on the grad level and postdoc and faculty, whatever. So anyway, just a food for thought for you. Because if you look at your audience, the big event, we talked about this before, you have that college and a lot of college students who are attending your event, right? And so the data is already telling you like the people that people that are wanting these things, right? High school to the college transition point. Yeah. And this is why when I saw Simple Neuroscience, that's exactly what I was looking at. I'm like, this is something that we are not, like you guys have a unique ability to engage. So just think about it in terms of your programming as well. It'll help you to narrow down who exactly is your audience, right, as you go forward.
Yeah. Sorry, just to follow up on my question originally. I was going to say there's a lot of people who are doing this already in like the grad student and postdoc sphere at like a very high level where they like started in the grassroots and now are like a fully like funded LLC and everything. So I think my question is really targeting like, you know, as Fanuel said, if there's all these other places doing it, what makes you different and what makes it worth supporting this organization instead of one that already exists? Because there either needs to be like some sort of gap or like some sort of clout that comes with supporting it. Otherwise, it just makes more sense like as a consumer or as like a funder or as someone who's going to these events to go to something with more clout. So focusing in on that difference, I think, is really key. And like in terms of like, you know, partnering, there's a lot of places like even Morgan Sweeney, who used to be, used to be in SAI. She was our intern. She works on a podcast that talks about mental health and neuroscience, and very easily could be, you know, a partnership there. There's also PhD Balance, which I highly recommend checking out. They're one of the biggest mental health advocates for people specifically at the grad student level. But I think that's part of what made them really successful is they early on decided we will focus on grad students and grad students only. We will not focus on postdocs. We will not focus on professors. And inevitably those people come in, but by focusing exclusively on grad students, they were able to build this community. And now they have like a very strong, like engaging type thing where they like have a lot of like talking back and forth and like specific grad students that they invite back. And then they'll have like a thing if someone graduates. So like by focusing it on that specific community, they were able to grow much bigger than some other organizations I've seen that started at grassroots focusing on mental health and then just kind of like did a general audience. But general audience is so big because mental health affects literally everybody. So it's a really large topic. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I agree that focusing on our high school and college demographic, as we try to do, is a good approach to take because it sets us apart. And also we'll look into partnering with those other organizations as well. I think especially that podcast is something that we'll look into as well. And also to add on to the uniqueness about Simple Neuroscience, we also have these different initiatives that I don't think other organizations have, such as elementary school neuroscience education. We have our legislation team and other interdisciplinary initiatives like that, even our event series. So I think these also set us apart from other similar nonprofits.
And if anybody missed it, they have 300 volunteers, okay, that they're working together. Is that right, Aravind? 300 plus or something like that? Yeah. So it's a lot of people that can do, I guess, a lot of different things. someone else had a comment.
I was just curious about how you advertised for this, because you got so many groups from all over the world. So are you targeting high schools specifically, or different institutions? And also another idea of, since you mentioned more diversity and inclusion, looking at, you know, HBCUs and that sort of thing. I don't know if you've done that, but that might be another thing to look into.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of advertising for our events, we have actually like quite a large social media following. So about like maybe not too impressive, I don't know, but in Instagram we have over 3,500 followers. On LinkedIn we have about 1,800 followers, and similar on Facebook and Twitter we have somewhat of a large significant following. So we've been able to get a large audience through that. And then a lot of the other nonprofit, student-run nonprofit community knows Something Neuroscience as this substantial neuroscience and psychology related and mental health related organization. So I think through word of mouth and through social media, we've been able to raise awareness about our projects and initiatives. And we've also reached out to schools themselves. So science department heads in each state, science supervisors, and even individual teachers, as well as some universities. But we'll definitely look into HBCUs. I think that's an area that we should definitely expand into as well to get more underrepresented minorities involved as well.
If you have a large following in India, it would be really cool to see working with SciComm group. It's a group that I help with. Let me drop the link in here. We have a really large following mostly in India and in South America because it's like international. And there's so much open for collaborations there. Instagram takeovers, lives, posts, etc.
Yeah, definitely. We're partnering with a few nonprofits in India already, but I think that's definitely something we'll also try to pursue as well.
Yeah, I just meant more for like reach. It's like, I think it's like 12,000 people now total. So just in terms of like, you know, spreading when you guys have events, like, you know, advertising them to as many people as you can that are willing to like talk about it, I think is always a good marketing strategy.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, the STEM Peers group as well. They've actually helped us fund the SAF Fellows program. So we have access to them as well. So if anybody this goes out for everybody, give events or something, you want to engage them, let me know. I can talk to the founders there. Jessica, did you want to say something?
Yeah, sorry I'm late. I was setting up a big experiment. So I'm sorry if I missed this, but I'm just curious what your like assay for impact is. Like, how are you measuring, like, is your goal like improve mental health? Is it that more people go into science? Like, I'm just trying to figure out like what the assay is for knowing that the program is doing what it's supposed to be doing. And then my second question is like more explicitly what your approach is to doing some of the legislative policy changes that you mentioned relating to mental health and insurance.
Yeah, so to address the first question about assays about how we're assessing learning and awareness. So I think I explained this before, but in conjunction with our Simple Neurocon event, which had over 1,200 participants, we conducted a survey of learning to assess the progression of learning throughout the conference. So there were 12 different categories of interdisciplinary neuroscience and psychology sessions. So like general neuroscience knowledge, AI, computer science, behavioral economics, neuroart, things like that. And you can see with all of these categories, there is a substantial progression in self-reported knowledge. I covered this before, but there might be some bias in self-reporting, but we expect that the bias would stay roughly constant in the 2-week period in which the survey was conducted. So relatively speaking, the data should be still significant in showing the amount of learning over the population. So this is one aspect.
Sorry, was this immediately post? And did you do like longer term survey of retention of information?
So we didn't do longitudinal research surveys yet, but we'll definitely implement that in the future to like assess knowledge at one point, and then a few months later using our content knowledge at like a few months later, a few weeks later. Yeah, I think that's definitely something that we'll look into as well.
Yeah, let me just add here that most people actually don't do this kind of thing. You know, you have a pre, mid, and post. And so I just want to commend you on just even thinking about this, having this foresight to have this information. You can always build from this, and this is the point here. You can always build from this, so this is great. Jessica, you mentioned the logic model that he presented way at the beginning. So Aravind, if you can go back to that logic model, it does somewhat present that big view, the assay that Jessica is asking about, and also thinking about the other second question that she asked about legislative things and how you plan to do that. Yeah, this is slightly, if you can zoom in a little bit, if you're able, I don't know if you can, it's slightly hard to see. If you can't, don't worry, it's fine. But yeah, so this is something that's, I think I always ask everyone, please have logic models for yourself personally. You can do this. So the SI Fellows program is heavily built on these logic models. And then, and I'm glad to, I don't think Aravind, I told you to use a logic model, but here it is. This is great to see. Anyway, I'll shut up.
I think I'm trying to think about, just to play devil's advocate, about how some of these things really lead to improved mental health.
True.
Like just learning about neuroscience doesn't necessarily mean your mental health is better. And so I'm just trying to see what that link is to that sort of like final output.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're trying to do with legislation is, one, to work with politicians to expand access to mental health therapy covered by insurance. So most insurance policies right now don't cover mental health therapy, psychiatry, things like that. So we're trying to work with politicians to expand access on that front, which over a very long term, hopefully that increases the overall societal mental health. In schools, we are also working to introduce mental health resources. So our team has created content and lessons about different mental health strategies of how to maintain mental well-being. So we hope to implement that into schools as well, which theoretically, and we'll measure this, hopefully will improve the mental health of students. So that's essentially how we're translating our content into actual societal impact.
And to piggyback on Jessica's point here, you may be, I think the mental health part of this is fairly complex. As we were talking about your app that I don't think you talked about today, but it is complicated going the mental health route and making that link to sort of neuroscience, right, Jess? This is what you're trying to go at.
Yeah, no, I'm just trying to kind of take apart the logic, because I think there's some holes there, I think, that need to be filled, and not clear to me exactly how they get to that, improve mental health. It's not an easy question by any means. Like, there's a lot of people thinking about this question, and it has not been figured out. So
yeah,
right.
One of our challenges, I guess you could say, is that we're not certified mental health professionals. So we don't claim to be, we should not claim to be. We're just high school and college students, and we've implemented. And so in our app, we released an app recently on Google Play Store, and we'll release one soon on the iOS as well. And I was discussing with Dr. Mundi, and he was saying that since we're not certified professionals, we shouldn't be offering mental health advice. So we won't be offering direct advice, and we can't offer direct advice, but through our activism and content creation and working with politicians, we hopefully can create this long-term improved mental health on a societal level.
And I would urge, I think you're doing so much overall, like you guys, I commend you on that. But also that is also a challenge, that if you try to do too much, you spread yourself too thin, and that way it's hard for you to make any meaningful change in any one aspect, right? So I think the issue of access, right? I think you try to present the problem at the beginning, like what is that issue? Like the students do not have these accessibility to these professors that are doing these presentations or knowledge, right? And you guys are providing that insight, and you have the data to show that people are coming in knowing little and they leave knowing something. And to Jessica's point, you can do a longitudinal thing, that's fine. But at least when they come after you, immediately afterwards, there's some change that's taken place. So I think try to look at your data in terms of what are people responding the most to. The events that you're doing, the Simply Neurocon, you're getting a lot of impact there, like a lot of people coming into that. And it's very tempting, I think, to try to do more things as well and try to keep that going. But look at that and say, well, this is wildly successful. Should we maybe focus on these events and really push the envelope there and see what we could do, rather than try to do all these other things as well, right? It all comes down to capacity. All of your volunteers. So the question is really, how much do you want to take on in any one go, right? And that's a challenge. It's a challenge just to think about and see, where do you want to invest your time and resources, giving you a little of it? Where do you want to spend your time? the events that you're doing I'm seeing a lot of, you have something there. And so the question is really, how do you want to use it and build on it? Yeah, the 2 events. And this is just impressive, getting 1,000 people to attend. And anyway, at least those are my 2 cents.
The reason why we have so many different projects or initiatives is that one reason is that our volunteers, they're high school students, they like, this is not their job. So they have different areas that they're interested in. Some people like public policy and legislation, other people like content creation. So that's why we have these different initiatives to capitalize on people's strengths. So that's one reason. Also, we see this problem of all these different areas, and there's not substantial impact so far on these areas. So I think that's another reason why we pursued these different areas. And we've already pursued the low-hanging fruit of just simple content creation of events. And I think along with bolstering these main initiatives, I think now would also be a good time to go on those other initiatives like the visual cortex, the podcast, other things like that. I think, I think like all of our initiatives complement each other and build up the cohesive picture that is something neuroscience.
Yeah, any other questions? Look at that, timing is fantastic. So Aravind, I just want to say welcome, first of all. This is your welcome, okay? And you hopefully got some really useful feedback from people. And we look forward to engaging with you. Aravind is on Slack. So any of you want to connect with him, give him tips, other additional resources, feel free to ping him there. He'll be around, and we're gonna be watching as he continues to grow Simply Neuroscience and expand on the initiatives. And hopefully SAI can help you on that avenue, Aravind, as well, and thinking strategically about how to move forward in your project, and also connecting you with what we have already in terms of our network. And I want to close and just say that one of the things, and I would love your Simply Neuroscience neural network, I think you called it, Aravind, right? It is very much in line with what we are trying to do with SAI in terms of creating a space that allows these connections to be made, okay? And I think the problem, if you sort of isolate that issue for what SAI is trying to tackle, yes, promoting STEM access, the connection between science and society, but ultimately it's like, we can't do this alone. We cannot, we need to work together. And the problem right now is that everybody's working in these silos, and the opportunities now exist to look at these connections and say, by working together, could we make massive impact by working together? And so that's the underlying question that we are trying to address. And the idea then is members in SAI can be given that capacity, right? Whether it's funding, whether it's mentorship, whether it's connections, right? To really, and then working together collaboratively to solve these issues, because these issues are massive and we need to be working together as a team. So those are my 2 cents. Aravind, welcome again. And I look forward to all of you to our next meeting. It'll be in October. I don't have the dates yet, but we will be launching that very soon. And also, please keep in mind, we're going to be having our SAI Fellows Demo Day in November. I'll send the date along when we're ready for that. The program launch is actually in a week and a half, so we're super excited to have these new fellows, their 4th cohort that will be launching, and all their exciting projects will be reading their applications, and their projects are quite intriguing, quite a few neuroscience as well. So with that, have a great weekend and afternoon.
And thank you so much. Excited to be part of SAI.
Wonderful.